Sure, there are mammals that can lay eggs and fish that can walk, but did you know that there's a whole host of animals with built-in self-destruct mechanisms? We are not even kidding. We've got exploding animals, animals that allow themselves to be eaten, and even one furry little guy who's wired not to think about eating at all. It's all on today's list of 10 animals that can actually self-destruct. Let's get started. First up is an arachnid whose name says it all, the black widow spider. We just learned that black widow spider is actually a nickname given to spiders in the genus Latrodectus. The nickname comes from, are you ready for this? The fact that the females will eat their male partners after mating. Actually, most widow spiders don't do this. Only 2 widow spider species tend to eat their mates, the Australian redback and the brown widow, a species found worldwide. Astoundingly, sometimes the male seems to be asking for it. In both of these species, males have been observed offering themselves up to their partners, even somersaulting into the female's mouth after mating. Apparently, this acts as a way for females to gain protein as a reproductive advantage. But why do the males do this? Scientists believe it's linked to the notion that the feeding will prevent the female from attracting other mates, thereby ensuring that the male's individual genes ultimately win out. Not surprisingly, however, the males aren't always keen on the idea and have been known to attempts to escape once mating is over. Sometimes they even make it. Next up, you've heard of an anglerfish, right? Big ugly thing with a biological fishing rod on the top of its head. Turns out it's only the female that looks like this. The male anglerfish is a whopping 90% smaller than its female counterpart. And these fellas also participate in a self-destructive behavior of their own. Once a tiny male anglerfish reaches adulthood, it seeks out a female. If it's lucky enough to find one, it then bites into her body and continues to hang on until, gruesomely enough, it becomes a parasite, and gradually his body tissues and bloodstream join with the female, allowing him to gain nutrients from her body. Eventually, most of the male's body becomes absorbed into the female's system. Talk about an overly attached boyfriend. Gross, right? What's also gross? This is how this species mates. Yikes! This is a perfectly normal part of the male anglerfish's life cycle, though we doubt very much that these little guys refer to the ritual as getting lucky. Out of the water and back on land for our next entry, the exploding ant. Native to the islands of Indonesia, the Colobopsis explodens is a species of ant with a rather kamikaze-like nature. At first glance, these little guys look like any ordinary little reddish-brown ants that live together in a large colony. If an outside predator like the much larger weaver ant comes along and wants to make a meal of them, however, they are in for a real surprise. Worker ants of this species will willingly approach would-be foes and, at first, raise their rumps as a warning. If the foe doesn't back off, one or more of the tiny worker ants bite down on it, angle their backsides in close, and flex so hard that their abdomens burst at the seams. By literally tearing themselves apart, individual exploding ants sacrifice themselves to protect the rest of the colony. Quite the noble use of a self-destruct mechanism, wouldn't you say? Moving right along, the female octopus is something that scientists call a semelparous animal, meaning that they reproduced just once before, well, self-destructing. Once the female octopus lays her eggs, it signifies the beginning of the end for the mother-to-be. She will spend the gestation period, which can last up to 10 months, closely guarding her eggs, never abandoning them, not even for a second. As a result, the mother octopus stops eating. The starvation then leads to erratic and even harmful behavior on the part of the mom. Once her eggs hatch, she passes on, leaving her young ones to raise themselves. Scientists aren't entirely sure why female octopuses engage in such behavior. Some suggest that this biological program may be nature's way of preventing mothers from eating their young. Or, because octopuses are capable of growing to enormous sizes, this might be a built-in way to protect the ecosystem from too many large, hungry adults. Either way, the behavior could also explain why octopuses are solitary yet highly adaptable creatures. We always knew that with parenting comes sacrifice, but not the kind those mother octopuses make. Unsurprisingly, however, a very similar behavior can be seen in another creature with 8 limbs, the desert spider. Only these moms take it one step further, allowing their young to practice something known as matrophagy. Allow us to explain what that means. In the breeding season, the female desert spider, which makes her home in the warm deserts and scrublands of Eurasia, produces high amounts of enzymes which allow her to regurgitate meals for her young. However, the overproduction of these digestive enzymes comes at a hefty price for these young mothers. Eventually, the enzymes become too much for her body to handle, and they bring her to an untimely end. However, Babies gotta eat, and since there are no more meals being regurgitated, the younglings eat the closest thing they can find. Yep, mommy. In conclusion, matrophagy is a scientific term for the condition whereupon offspring feed on their own mother. Did you already guess that before we told you? Give this video a quick like if you did. Hey, we're on a roll, so why not talk more about cannibalism? We're willing to bet that you've probably heard about the cannibalistic behavior of the next creature on this list, the praying mantis. That's right, the rumors are true. When two praying mantises mate, the act sometimes ends with the female biting her male partner's head off and having it for a snack. Totally normal, right ladies? Anyway, it turns out this gruesome behavior only happens about 20% of the time, and there's a really good reason for it. According to a study published in 2016, the female's propensity for devouring her mate may have evolved to better provide for her offspring. Turns out, females who perform this cannibalistic act tend to produce more eggs, and the proteins that they get from noshing on their Tinder dates is passed on to their offspring. The team behind this study says that this is, quote, considered an extreme case of male parental investment. Yikes. If any male mantises are watching this video, we'd like to suggest taking your date out to dinner first. Sticking with insects, let's talk about that adorable little all-important buzzjoy, the honeybee. How are honeybees self-destructive, you ask? No, it's not by eating too much honey. When a honeybee perceives a threat to itself or to the hive, what does it do? It stings the threat, of course, and a bee sting can hurt like heck. Not only is the stinger itself pronged like a tiny piece of barbed wire, but it's also venomous. The problem for the little bee is that once it's attacked, it can't pull the stinger back out. But unfortunately for the little fella, it leaves behind not only the stinger, but part of his lower body as well, and it's this massive abdominal rupture that kills the bee. This self-destruction makes sense from an evolutionary perspective. Since the worker bees that defend the hive don't reproduce, protecting the hive and its reproductive relatives inside is their way of ensuring that their genes get passed on. A list of animals would be incomplete without at least one mammal, and this one has one wild self-destruct mechanism built into its genetic makeup. Say hello to the brown antagonist, a type of mouse native to southeastern Australia. The males of this species hold a peculiar world record. Remember what semelparous means? These guys hold the record for being the smallest semelparous mammals. It seems as though the male brown antagonist is blessed, or maybe we should say cursed, with an overwhelming drive to mate. The drive is so overwhelming that these guys forget all about food. As a result, the life expectancy of a male brown antigonus is just shy of a year at 11.5 months. Luckily, the females give birth to large litters, ensuring the overall survival of this almost humorously self-destructive little mouse. If you thought those other two spiders we talked about earlier had some really strange habits, wait until we tell you about the dark fishing spider. The dark fishing spider is a semi-aquatic arachnid found in North America and is so named for its ability to stab unsuspecting passing small fish while hovering over small streams and puddles of water. Biological scientist Stephen Schwartz from the University of Nebraska at Lincoln recently discovered that the mating habits of a dark fishing spider include both cannibalism and male self-sacrifice. In what Schwartz calls the ultimate nuptial gift, it appears that once the male dark fishing spider is done mating, it spontaneously shuffles off his mortal coil, so to speak, and the female responds by sitting down to a fresh daddy spider dinner. Now that is weird. What's surprising is that Schwartz believes that most males die before fulfilling their reproductive potential. Though he's mostly baffled by this, he currently believes that it may have something to do with the males deciding that they no longer need to search for the perfect mate. They've already found her. How romantic! Let's go out with a bang. Literally, this little green guy is a pea aphid, not just because it looks like a pea, but it also eats them. This highly studied little bug is found worldwide munching on crops of legumes, much to the dismay of farmers everywhere. Oftentimes, ladybugs, its natural predator, are introduced to control its population. However, in response, the pea aphid has an unusual defense mechanism not unlike those ants we talked about earlier. Yep, these guys will explode themselves to scare off or even destroy predators and thereby sacrificing themselves to save their brethren. Here's what's so interesting though. Very little is known about the actual physical mechanism that causes the explosion. Perhaps we'll find out soon though, because it turns out that pea aphids are known for being a model organism for biological study. The pea aphid genome has even been sequenced and annotated. Guess we'll just have to wait and see if science can figure out what makes these tiny time bombs tick. Well, that's all the time we have for animals that can actually self-destruct. Which one was the most fascinating? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.